back. You're listening to You Would Think, the Philadelphia Flyers podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Collington, and joining me, as always, Kevin Durso. How are you, buddy?
I'm doing all right. How are you?
Doing good. I know you're playing a little hurt today. I'm playing a little hurt too. We're kind of working through some injuries today, but we didn't have a show last week, so we had to come back. It has been a couple of weeks since our last show. Welcome back if you're back. Before we kind of dive into it, we got 2 weeks worth of games to break down. We're hitting the trade deadline. Before we do all that, follow us on the social media at YWT Podcast. Make sure to follow Kevin at Kevin_Durso. Find the show everywhere you find your podcast, including sportstalkphilly.com. Okay, so diving right into it, we've had 6 Flyers games since our last show, and it's been a bit of a mixed bag up and down. The Flyers end up 3-3. Now, in my eyes, that's a little bit misleading because you had a really tight game against the New York Rangers in there that, man, if you win that game, and quite frankly, I think you were the better team that night. We might get into that a little bit here, but if you win that game, you come out of this 4-2, and the tone for this show is kind of drastically different, right? Like 500 just feels different than 67%.
Yeah, I hear where you're going with this. Like, I know it's like you said, it's mixed bag,
Yeah.
And this time of year, I think brings that out because of the playoff structure. There's so many teams still involved. You're going to get games where stuff is going your way. You're going to get games where it doesn't go your way. You're going to need, kind of however it works.
Right.
Like it's just, if you're looking for games where, like, you try to look for games where you feel like you have it completely. And I think that that's hard to come by at this time of year just because everybody's dealing with something one way or another. I mean, I think the easiest place to begin in that respect is, I guess, I'm trying to remember if it was, I guess it was starting with the Ranger game. So 5 games now.
Okay.
They've been with, playing without Travis Konechny.
Yep.
Been dealing with an injury. And it sounds like he's close at this point. So,
right.
Like, to not make people panic. It's like
what they said on the broadcast is that it's a possibility for Monday, but Thursday in Florida looks a little more likely.
Right.
That's what Jim Jackson was saying on the broadcast.
Because that's how, and I obviously this was coming from a road game situation. This was in Washington. That members who were traveling with media members traveling for that game got Danny Briere that night.
Okay.
So Briere had said on Friday that they were going to get through the weekend. And to be quite honest, I think the determination there is, how do you define the weekend? Is the weekend get to Sunday when we're recording this as we speak and see if Monday's a possibility, or are we lumping Monday in because it's a 3-4 weekend?
Danny Briere seems like a 3-day weekend kind of guy.
I don't well, not right now. He's not.
No.
Right
no,
now,
absolutely not.
He's working every day of the week and twice on Sunday. He's
nose to the grindstone coming up on his 1-year anniversary of being Flyers GM.
From a general manager standpoint, you get a little bit of a break. Not that you're not making daily moves and trying to figure out how things work, but you're going to get a break technically as soon as this trade deadline passes, because there's not really anything that they can do. And to be honest, like, even down to like we don't have a tab for this or anything like that, and it's not something that it's not shaking up the organization today or tomorrow. Let's put it that way.
Okay.
But there was reports that came out, and it's pretty much, from all accounts, I had heard pretty much like the deal's already done. It's just they're signing Denver Barkey to an entry-level deal.
Yes, and that is probably something that will get officially news dropped after the show releases, but we can mention it here a little bit.
And the reason why I'm bringing it up like that is because there's a possibility that's out on Sunday at some point, whether that's, it could be while we're recording, it could be right after, who knows, or it could be Monday. I've heard it could be like Monday. The bottom line is, what I'd also heard while being down there on Saturday was the deal was done days ago.
Right.
Like, he's already signed. It's a done deal. Which also lends to how people found out that this was happening, because apparently, and I didn't see it, like, I found out later it was deleted. Like, I was probably driving. This is probably why I missed it. I was probably driving to Saturday's game. The London Knights put out something about congrats to Denver Barkey.
Oh, that's really funny.
Pulled the trigger too soon, basically.
That's really funny.
And then had to pull back because the team didn't announce it. So
no, do you know, is the plan for him to join the Phantoms then?
No. I guess not unless they think they can get him up there like once his season's over, like as one of those things. Like
Okay.
it's one of those things.
Oh, okay. So he's just signing, just on paper.
They're just
It
locking him up.
doesn't really.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, let's just say it
It
doesn't.
won't change anything about the day to day.
No. And especially considering that the London Knights have played well enough, especially over the second half of the season.
They're Memorial Cup contenders at a minimum.
At the very least, you got to factor in.
Maybe a favorite.
Well, at the very least, you got to factor in they're going to be heavily involved in the OHL playoffs first.
Absolutely.
Start there. Then we'll, worry about the Memorial Cup stuff later and how long that goes into the picture. But Bonk's already signed.
Yep.
So if his day-to-day wasn't affected by it, then Barkey's isn't going to be either.
Right.
And then you just think about the rest of the makeup of that team with Easton Cowan and who's on just some ridiculous point streak. I think last time I saw it's like something like 24 games, or it's maybe more than that even. It's like it's in the 20s.
Right.
That he's got a point streak going, which like I saw something the other day about him because it was Toronto drafted him like late first round. Like I'm trying to remember, I forget what year it was. I guess it was last year. And everybody would the thought process was, wow, that looks like a reach, and now it's not a reach anymore. It feels
not a reach
because all of a sudden he's had like an incredible year. They've got I believe Sam Dickinson is the defenseman who's draft eligible this year, who's gonna go high, top 10 material, easy, and just keeps putting it up as well, and things like that. So they've got a lot of talent, and I almost don't expect, if they play long enough, I almost don't expect them to be done in time to do anything from a minor league standpoint. And Barkey, for what it's worth, also, because we've already joked about what Ian LaPerriere says about Barkey, how he looks like he's still a teen. Well, he is a teenager, but
he looks like a child.
He looks like a child, and it's not just in facial structure here and facial features. He
looks like he weighs about 130 pounds soaking wet
because he does basically. He's not even draft day. He wasn't even listed at 150.
No, and
so there's a lot of that's you get my point now though. There's a lot of legwork to do, but that I think where I'm going with this is that like we said, it's we were talking about Travis Konechny in this sense and what determines the weekend for Danny Briere and things like that. And even down to, and believe me, at this point, we're down to less than a week to go until this thing. So my eyes are always on the phone a little bit. You're keeping a close eye out for some stuff. We'll get into what could be, I guess, but at the moment anyway, I'm not expecting anything right now. And I'm not talking about
nothing at all.
I'm not talking about for Friday. I'm talking about in the here and now. I think whatever they're going to do,
it'll be Thursday or Friday.
I think everybody is ready to hit the accelerator as soon as something the week is here. Something could happen at any minute. And I'm kind of peeled back where it's the deadline's Friday. And I really think for them, that's what it's going to mean because of where they are.
I think there's no reason for Danny Briere, obviously Danny Briere not to be working the phones now, but there's no reason for Danny Briere not to be ready to go Tuesday morning, right? You play Monday night, Tuesday morning, you're kind of ready to go. You got 2 days before your Thursday game, just in case. But
and
around the league, a lot of times you don't get activity until 24 to 36 hours before the deadline.
Well, and that's why I'm saying for what it's worth, to me, I'm not expecting a thing on Sunday. I'm not expecting a thing on Monday because they're going to probably roll into Monday's game with everything the same.
Yeah.
And everybody playing. Anybody who you can think of who we've mentioned as trade possibilities and all that stuff like that.
Unless something huge drops in your lap. But I don't think that's happening.
But I don't think there's
Vancouver's not calling you and offering you Elias Pettersson.
Well,
they already did that.
Which, by the way, I saw something that was very fair about that, which is if they're not having the year that they are right now, does that happen?
Probably not. Probably not 8 years.
I don't even know if I'm just saying, I don't know if it's something that gets there right now. I think the reason why the player is willing to sign in February,
the crazy thing
or March, is because
the crazy thing is, I think if the deal doesn't get there, I think they would have traded him.
Well, and that's what I'm trying to get at is I don't know. Well, and I'm not going to go that far with it. I think they would have
They would have been trying much harder.
Well, not even trying much harder. I don't think they were gonna just move the guy in the middle of like while they're still ranked where they are in the standings. But I think that the long-term position, although that's the thing, they're ranked where they are in the standings. If they're not where they are in the standings, I think that like if they're on the bubble instead, or if they're not in the playoff picture, then I think they were moving them.
And instead, the Vancouver Canucks keep Elias Pettersson, sign him to 8 years, 11.6 per, making him
super fair deal, by the way, for both sides. I think
he'll be the 5th highest played player in hockey, which is what Elias Pettersson gets out of it. And what the Vancouver Canucks get out of it is you get this player from 26 to 34. You get his entire
and the reason why
career.
And that's the reason why I'm calling it fair is like right now he's the 5th, or he would be the 5th highest player.
Right. He'll be the 5th highest going into next season as of right now.
He won't be anywhere close to. He won't even be top
in 2 years.
No. I don't think he'll be top 15 by the end of that contract.
Oh, I don't think he'll be top 10 in 2 years, 3 years.
Quite possibly. Yeah, 3 years is better. 3 years is
right.
better. 2 years, I'm not sure, but
because the McDavid contract's coming, and that's going to.
I know the McDavid one's coming, and that's obvious. But like, I'm talking about like.
Oh, I know, but a lot of big players have contracts in the meantime.
That's why I'm saying I just get the sense that for his age, for his performance level, that's going to age really well in the early.
It's going to age beautifully.
Right. That's like I don't think you could have asked. Now I'm genuinely curious about everybody else, but then again, I also look at everybody else that you could talk about from that roster and go, whether it's Besser or Miller or whatever, it's like they're older guys though. Yeah. Maybe your point is stick to this guy who's in his prime, right, and like build it around him.
Right, and you're buying his entire productive career.
And they did and they did it with Hughes too.
Right. Exactly. You have those two locked up forever.
And as far as I'm concerned, if Demko's your guy in goal, you're really like that's taking a page out of the Dallas Stars book and going, got the forward, got the defenseman, got the goalie. There's the cornerstones at each position. Figure out the rest,
Absolutely.
And we're going to get into it. That's the challenge the Flyers face.
Yes, that is the challenge the Flyers face.
So, but anyway, so we were on Travis connecting to start this. We've already gone off the rails a little bit.
A couple times.
But
welcome to the trade deadline shows.
But that's my point is that whenever they decide that he's close to coming back or whatever, you still go into some of these games. And I think the way you put it, this 3-3 over, like, yes, it's a mixed bag in terms of record. Like they've won 3 and lost 3.
Right, you only got 6 points out of a possible 12.
But I also think that this kind of goes back to where we were with the previous show, because the last time we did a show was right after the Stadium Series, and there was like this sense of complete chaos, freak out over, well, they lost to the Devils in regulation. Oh no, here it comes.
Right.
And this is the thing to me, and like as we go through with this, because like I'm glossing over a bunch of these games. We're not going to break down all 6 of these games in full detail and all stuff like that. There's trade deadline stuff to get into, all that.
Absolutely.
All right, you don't play the greatest game in the world against Chicago, but Chicago's so bad that you win the game.
You manage to stabilize a little bit.
It's not even that you manage to stabilize. It's just, okay, you still get the result that you wanted to bounce back from the outdoor game.
Right.
Because Chicago's just so bad. As much as that game was in a position at one point in time where you're like, oh boy, like the game is tied.
Right, here we go.
Like total trap game positioning here. And that's it. Like John Tortorella couldn't have been more correct after that Jersey game than to say exactly what he did about the Chicago game. How, that game scares you because of the fact that you've still got to be ready to play. I mean, this is, as much as they've done so much right from a winning standpoint and being in the playoff picture and all that for the duration of what has to be going on at this point. I mean, all of December, all of January, all of February. So over 3 months. This is still the team that lost to the San Jose Sharks.
Right.
First this year.
Right.
That is what gives you the creeps about a game like Chicago, where first of all, you just got amped up for this outdoor game. It didn't go well. You get 3 days in between the 2 games. May not be the easiest one to get up for. Definitely screams trap.
Oh, yeah.
The fact that you didn't get trapped is exactly what you needed. So I don't care how it looked. You won the game.
2 points.
you already kind of brought it up a little bit because, like, mentioning the Ranger game a little bit.
Yeah.
That's the very first game, and I wouldn't be surprised if. Actually, I'm pretty sure that I know this already because I saw a little bit of this reaction. As soon as they basically give you the information that Travis Konechny is not playing, then everybody just chalks it up right then and there to begin with. And instead, you play a really competitive game. You don't give up anything until mid to late second period.
You make Igor Shesterkin make 39 saves.
Mm-hmm.
Like you come out and you absolutely pump Igor Shesterkin 40 shots. You lose to you come out and you outplay one of the best teams in the league, the best team in your division as of right now, even though Carolina's on their heels a little bit here.
Mm-hmm.
You lose to a very, 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 very good goalie.
Sure. And who's found his game lately, too, let's not forget.
And the single biggest freak show superstar the NHL has seen in several years in Matt Rempe. And we don't have to go in deep on the Matt Rempe thing because everyone's been doing it for 2 weeks and blah, 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 blah. But this kid comes in and tears an absolute path through the NHL through his first 4 games. And I know that he had kind of started to build the reputation when they come into Philadelphia. You had the Matt Martin outdoor fight. You had this, that, the other. That game on Saturday, so far, it's only been a couple of weeks. That game against the Flyers Rangers on Saturday was the peak of Matt Rempe's career, right? He has an absolute brawl with Nick Delorier, one of the best fights of the year. One of the best fights, honestly, one of the best fights in a very long time. Since the 2012 lockout, maybe. Like, when's the last time we had a really good heavyweight brawl like that?
Because more and more you're not finding guys who qualify as heavyweights. That's part of the equation.
Exactly.
Also, so.
I want Zdeno Chara to come out of retirement just to fight Matt Rempe. And I don't actually want him to because that will break Zdeno Chara in half. But what I'm saying is this kid comes in. He has an absolute showdown with Nick Delorier. It felt like a scene out of Goon. They set it up in the pregame. And then he scores the game winner off his knee.
Yeah.
The absolute peak of this kid's career so far. And good for him. But that's what you lose to as a Fly. If that's what it takes to beat you as a Flyers team.
Well, unfair. That's fair. Because I was even going to get
out of that Rangers team.
And that's why I was even going to go into it, because you can look back at some of the other games that they lost, whichever ones you want to. And I don't even know if you can equate, like, to be fair, it wasn't. The Devils have a lot of talent in different areas on paper. And Nico Hischier had a really good game in the outdoor game, and they got contributions from depth guys too, like Nathan Bastian had 2 goals in that game, things like that. You obviously normally put the spotlight on Jack Hughes, though.
Sure.
That's their superstar. To me, more so than even Hischier at this point. Than Hischier, than Bratt, and all of them. Jack Hughes is the guy to me who is
the face of that team.
The face of it and the take over the game guy.
Yeah.
The day after the Ranger game, when they lose a game to Pittsburgh, it's the Sidney Crosby show again. He's involved heavily in every part of this.
Well, right? And Cal Peterson can't stop a beat.
Well, we'll get to that part. I'm not breaking down the game. I'm just talking about what I'm getting at is it goes in line with what happened right before the outdoor game. Austin Matthews hat trick. Before that, we already know McDavid, McKinnon, Kucherov. Now Kucherov we'll get back to over the course of the last 2 weeks, but every single one of these guys has been, whoever the take over the game guy is, the elite talent, has kind of feasted on the Flyers in these games lately. So if you're going to tell me that they played the Rangers, and sure, Shesterkin's the guy who I guess becomes the steal the game, take over the game guy, because a goalie always can, no matter what no matter what tier you fall into, even the guy in the lowest tier could have an incredible game and be that guy.
Absolutely.
But my point being, I go into the thing and I think Artemi Panarin had 1 goal and 9 assists in his previous 5 games. Nothing.
Yep.
Or Vincent Trocheck's had a good year, or Mika Zibanejad, who's killed the Flyers over the years, or Chris Kreider, who's killed the Flyers over the years. Nothing from any of them. Yep. Scoring chances, sure, but nothing.
Sure.
You know, I mean, even down to
Cam Erson played really well.
even down to and eventually he still scored a goal, but Alexis Lafreniere had a great scoring chance and didn't score like right before he did. And
Right.
Look, is it tough? Sure. And like immediately the first question that comes up is, do they win the game if they have Konechny? It's possible.
It's very possible.
It's possible. You
Yeah.
take your leading scorer off the ice.
Oh,
You lose an offensive element. They
there's
had
a-
chances anyway.
There's a possibility that if Travis Konechny had played over these last 2 weeks, the Flyers would be 5-1 or 4-1-1, or, you know, like their record would be better than the 3-3-0 that it currently is.
Because you have to look at the games. When you look at the games that they lost, it's the loss to the Rangers where maybe
Very, very
some more
close.
offense gets it for you. It's hard to say. I mean, Shesterkin played so well. Maybe Konechny playing or not doesn't matter in that equation. I mean, let's be real. Also, when you had the goalie pulled at the end of the game, you had a one-timer set up for Morgan Frost that he missed, and Sean Couturier got the bank off the end boards that he wasn't able to put short side into a basically an open net there too. It hit the post instead.
Yeah, a couple opportunities.
A couple opportunities, but also a couple of inches one way or the other in different aspects of it, and you're looking at a tie game, and that place was going to go nuts because
absolutely.
And we'll get to the guy who actually scored a goal in that game a little later on.
Yeah, we will.
Because that's a different story. But that's the whole equation with the Ranger game is you needed one and you couldn't get it on this guy. And
Igor Shesterkin was ridiculous. He built the wall.
But it's not like the chances weren't there.
Right.
That's all. You just couldn't finish when it came down to it.
And sometimes
you threw everything at him.
Sometimes you don't.
Exactly.
Yep.
And the Rangers, by the way, let's also not gloss over the fact that the Rangers had won 9 straight coming into that game.
Yeah, great team. Great team, great goalie.
Great team. And when you're hot, you're hot. And things sometimes go your way. And guess what happened the next day, by the way? They lost.
Yep.
To Columbus. So all the energy that goes into defending 40 shots that come towards your goalie.
They emptied the tank.
They sure did. And it cost them the next day.
And
when
the Flyers made
them like Columbus.
Yep. Now you would have liked to get the 2 points rather than just simply cost them the 2 points. But, you'll take what you can get.
It's not even, it's not even that I care that they lost the game. You would have loved to have been rewarded with 1. Even if you lose the game in overtime because the Rangers are a better team than you are.
Right.
You had played well enough to at least give yourself the shot to say, let's just see what the coin flip of 3-on-3 is.
Well, and the very next day, even though Cal Peterson, as previously mentioned, couldn't stop a beach ball, you were still only 1 goal away. And it feels like the kind of game. I know we were talking about, the impact of missing Travis Konechny here. And he would have either scored a hat trick or gotten kicked out or both. That's because it was just that kind of game. It felt a little bit 2012. It felt a little bit wild. Did. Right. The Flyers only led once and then spent the rest of the game kind of clawing back and trying to tie it.
I'm going to tell you what, you've already touched on what was frustrating about it, but it's exactly so because the goaltending
was not good enough.
You have average goaltending, you win that game. And the thing that was especially frustrating, they had just.
I think if you have David Ayers in net, you win that game.
Pittsburgh had just beaten Montreal earlier that week, but they had otherwise, since the All-Star break, they came out of the All-Star break and shut out Winnipeg 3-0. Lost 3 in a row to Minnesota, Winnipeg again, and Florida. Beat Chicago, which.
Who hasn't?
Right, kind of not a major accomplishment at this point. Lost to the Kings. Lost to the Islanders in overtime, then beat Montreal. And I'm looking at this particular game, and
and you have a chance to kind of bury Pittsburgh.
But that team is not good.
Correct.
I'm sorry, they're not good.
They have a couple of good players, but they are not a good team.
Why? Because go look at any of the games that they've lost. Go look at the one that they actually won, but still gave up 6 goals in. They don't get out of their own way.
No.
That's the whole summary of what their problem is they can't get out of their own way in one way or another.
No, and honestly, as a Flyers fan, we love to see that.
And as much as I will give them credit for, hey, they followed up the Flyers game that they won with, they had to come back against Vancouver, no less, which Vancouver's kind of hit a rut right now too. I get it, but they still had to come back against a team like that. Then just when it looks like, oh, look, now they're building momentum because that was the other one, right? Like the Pittsburgh game on last Sunday, was the next round of what the Jersey game was outdoors. It was, oh, you have a chance. You came into that Stadium Series game up 7 on the Devils. Win the game in regulation, it's 9. Guess what? Look at the gap now. But lose it, it's 5. Totally different story. And there was an element where people were waking up on Sunday with a doom and gloom feel, like here it comes. Here comes the rut. They're gonna, here comes the collapse. Been a great run, but here comes the collapse. They still beat Chicago to kind of get it a little back on the rails for a light week. Lost to the Rangers, but everybody's kind of seemed to agree the process was good. They deserved a better fate than they got. They got goalied by Shesterkin. Okay, yeah. Fine. And then as soon as they lose a game like that to Pittsburgh, it's here we go again, because now Pittsburgh is not knocked out of the competition. You had a chance to bury Pittsburgh and you didn't. So now it's the same situation, right? And all that has happened from last Sunday to this Sunday, and this is also a 2-week thing with the Devils as well, is these two teams that could be in the playoff picture. I mean, they are technically, but you know what I mean. Right. That could be actually in the final playoff spot or hold up a playoff spot in general, because the Devils came in with expectations based off of last year. Pittsburgh went out and made the blockbuster trade of the offseason. Got Erik Karlsson. And not that I'm trying to sit there and say that what's going on is not a direct result of that, by the way, because Erik Karlsson's not there for defense. And if you want to go and if you want to get an example of that, go watch Scott Lawton's shorthanded goal from that game on Sunday. Where Karlsson just completely blows by the whole thing. Like, I don't need to stand here and take care of this guy. I'm just going to follow the puck behind the net while I'm on a power play.
Yep.
But I digress. Anyway.
Well, and the fact that he still kind of can't skate in terms of getting back on recovery, like his ankle is definitely still compromised.
But it's the exact point that, like, you lose this critical game to the Devils, or what everybody thinks is a critical game, right?
Sure.
And it's unique circumstances. It's outdoors, so there's a reason to believe like your goalie may not have had the best night, but I don't think that that's him either, because it's outdoors. The angles are a little like
it's so weird. Hard to give the goalie the
lines are different,
right?
Games, right. Like he looked, and then not again. It's Chicago, but he looked fine against Chicago, and then he played well against the Rangers.
Yeah,
I'm not even gonna get it. I'm not even gonna get into anything else with it. But
by the way, the Devils are 2-4 since that Stadium Series.
But that's my point. So you got the Devils are doing that, and okay, the Penguins win a game against the Flyers. That realistically, what it changed was it kept fate in their hands, because now they had 4. They still do, honestly. Like, I get it, but they have 4 games in hand, and you just from those games in hand, they could make up the gap on the Flyers if they win them all.
Yeah, if the Flyers had beaten the Penguins and everything else played out the same, the Flyers would currently have a 13-point gap on them for a playoff spot.
Well, and
which was 22 to 25 games left, is that you're done. It's over.
Well, to be honest, and I know that it's not like, I get that they have the fewest games played in the division.
Yeah.
But the gap is 9 points.
It's tough.
And it's not even just that it's tough. You lose a game the way that they lost to Calgary on Saturday night. That game screams to me, this is over.
Okay.
It just does. I'm sorry. To me, they are the big of the teams that are right in this picture. They're the biggest non-threat, because I just don't see them getting out of their own way enough.
Yeah, you blow a 3-1 lead in the back half of the third period. For anybody that didn't stay up to watch the Calgary late game last night, Penguins blow a 3-goal lead in the third, or a 3-1 lead in the third period to lose 4-3 in regulation.
There's an element where there is an element where that's part of the script, right? That the final score was 3-4 on the score bug, and it was the night they retired Mika Kiprasov's number.
That's cute. Yeah,
like, come on.
Yeah, that's cute.
It lined up pretty perfectly.
Yeah.
And so to me, the biggest thing beyond that is, so Pittsburgh can't get out of their own way. The Devils haven't gotten out of their own way either, as we just mentioned. You really are back to watching among this group of 4 teams that have kind of all been trading places lately, you're now back to watching 2, and I don't want to say it's completely a different 2, but it's like 3 of them rotate positions to make them the primary focus.
Yeah.
Because a couple weeks, like at one point in time, fairly recently, it was Pittsburgh that was in that we were talking about, and we weren't talking about Washington. And now you're talking about Washington again, and you're not really going to talk about Pittsburgh.
Right.
You know,
And we're getting to the point in the season where there's just not enough road left, where teams are gonna, when they fall out of it, they're gonna fall out of it pretty permanently.
I'll tell you what a bigger problem is, okay? And I'm not like we're gonna get to the trade deadline stuff in a couple minutes, I know, but right now to this point, you can look at what the Flyers have done collectively through the course of the season and say there's a lot of things that are positive about what Danny Briere and Keith Jones have done, generally speaking. Obviously, there's a lot of praise for how John Tortorella's gotten the most out of the team.
As far as I'm concerned, this season is already a success.
I hear you. No, that's not where I'm trying to go with it.
No, that's fine. Yeah.
Like, if you're trying to pick based off of, well, they're in a playoff spot and here's 4 teams that are behind them chasing them. I sit there and I look and I go, in Pittsburgh, Kyle Dubas is already getting questions because it's you traded for Erik Karlsson.
Yep.
And that's gotten you nowhere. Like,
yep.
I know what you're trying to do to maximize the core. And now you're sitting in a position where what do you do with Jake Gensel? Because he's one of the
he's
most
one of the big names out
on the
there.
market.
Yep.
Yeah.
They rallied a little bit and kept themselves in it enough that the talk quieted down, and also Gensel got hurt. But now that they're falling back out of it, I wonder if they look to deal.
And I believe I saw on social media over the course of the last 12 hours more than anything, because it was once the game was over, where the Dubas kind of had Dubas threw a fit during the game last night.
That's funny. He's
done
that once or twice.
Something happened, and people even said it was basically a Cam Neely moment.
Oh.
If you know what I mean, Cam Neely water bottle moment. If you know what I mean.
Yeah. He's had a couple of those.
But it's all in his, and people are gonna look at him. People are gonna look at Mike Sullivan. People are gonna look at, think about what it means for the core. Let's not forget with Pittsburgh, they went out and re-signed Malkin and Letang and are trying to squeeze every last ounce of juice out of this thing.
They set themselves up for a 3 or 4 year window here.
So they thought anyway. They're sitting in 7th place in the division right now.
That's what I'm saying. They put their eggs in the basket for kind of a 3-year window, and
sure,
that basket doesn't smell too great right now.
No, so you got that. You've got with the Devils, you've got people who are watching that little stretch like, hey, the Stadium Series was all fun and good. You said what, 2-4 since then?
Correct.
And definitely occasions where Fire Lindy's been trending on social.
That has reared its ugly head again.
You know what I mean? So I'm just saying, so if you've got people who are out there putting out there, fire the coach, 60 games into the season of a year where you're still technically in a playoff picture, or at least where you had expectations and you're 3/4 of the way through and you're still not there. Right. What does that tell you?
Yep.
Washington has regardless of what happened, and we'll get into the Washington game as well over the course of this week, but Washington has a -30 goal differential. And as much as they've played better lately, it doesn't change the fact that that's been their makeup for a chunk of the year.
They've been bad for large chunks of the year.
And then even the Islanders, for being the next closest team as we speak this Sunday morning, being 5 points back of the Flyers, have been largely inconsistent since the coaching change, and already by the way, how about throw that wrinkle in that they changed the coach halfway.
Patrick was the coach, right?
Like none of these teams are without flaws,
right? Who's the most stable situation here? Philadelphia, New York, or Washington?
It's still Philly at this point.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. The coach isn't changing. The team or the GM isn't changing. The roster isn't materially changing. Maybe a trade of Sean Walker or a Nick Sealer, but
But think about something, actually. This is a perfect way to look at it, okay? The Rangers are leading the division and have everything kind of lined up.
Yeah.
Right? They've built a solid, successful team. This is not the first time they've been near the top of the division, going toward the playoffs, all that stuff. And the only key difference is that after things fell apart in the playoffs last year, they made a coaching change. So here's Peter Laviolette first year. That's about it. But you know that's stable right now. And you know that they feel stable with their management situation because Chris Drury's running the show, and that's
totally their goaltending is stable. Their roster's pretty stable.
Right.
The New York Rangers are a pretty stable organization at this point in time.
Okay, so go to the next one in line. Carolina. What you see is what you get from that team. You know who the coach is, you know who the management is. Nothing changes with that right now.
Other than the occasional financial question about will the owner be willing to pay everybody, other than that, that's a pretty stable
That's
situation.
an off-season question. I'm talking about
totally.
For in-season changes. There's nothing coming. Don Waddell is
Absolutely nothing
still
going.
running the show general manager-wise. Rod Brindamore is your coach. There's nothing more to be said. And then you go to the Flyers, who have big changes in the offseason leading in, but technically so did the Rangers. The Rangers made a coaching change last year, so it doesn't change anything.
Yep.
You've got your front office set up. You've got your coach. And then the remaining 5 have all done something.
Yep.
The Islanders fired their coach. The Capitals, okay, no management change, no coaching change, but it was a slow grind to get there. And
there's been some turmoil in the locker room too.
Oh, I was gonna say, if you want the oddity, it's Alex Ovechkin's not having typical Alex Ovechkin year. And that's kind of rubbed off on everything else.
Well, and they have the whole Evgeny Kuznetsov situation where he entered the players' assistance program. He returned from the players' assistance program. They just waived him the other day. You never know how that's going to affect a team just because the situation seems funky at best.
Yeah, I know. It is what it is, though.
But as it sits here right now, like you said, out of all these teams that are kind of contending, the Flyers are.
But you've got that's what I'm saying. You got the Devil. Yeah. But I'm saying the Devils are. You got people calling for the coach. You're gonna have with Pittsburgh. You're gonna have people calling for both the coach and
probably Dubas already.
As much as he's a new GM, they're gonna be calling for it because
you only have 3 years of Sidney Crosby left, and he's been there longer than the management has.
Sure, and then obviously Columbus has done both this year. Columbus had a coaching change. Well, a coaching change after the coaching change.
Expectations were a little different for Columbus.
Because that's what started it all off to begin with. It was this is how it's going to be. The Babcock thing was the first part of it.
I was going to say, if Mike Babcock was their coach, they still weren't going to be a very good team.
No, but once that happened, that's what put Yarmo on the hot seat, and then it just kind of boiled over from there to where they are. And
that situation's wild. If Columbus was a bigger market, that would get so much attention.
But it's just like that's what's interesting to me about this is every time it looks like there have been 3 times over the course of these 6 games. 3 times. As a matter of fact, well, no, because we're not lumping in the Stadium Series because we talked about that last show. So it's not one of the 3, but they haven't lost a game. Like seriously, since the All-Star break, they haven't lost a game in regulation to a team that's outside of the division. It has not happened.
I mean, that bodes pretty poorly given the current playoff setup in the NHL.
Like, I'm serious. I know, but you go look. It's Florida, Winnipeg, Seattle, Arizona, 4-game winning streak. Overtime loss to Toronto. There's the first one. Okay, you lose in regulation to the Devils outdoors. You beat Chicago. Lost to the Rangers. Lost to Pittsburgh. Beat Tampa. Lose to Washington. Come back. Beat Ottawa.
Yep.
So the point I'm making with that is that the only 4 regulation losses they've got since the All-Star break are all divisional, and as such, maybe a little less on the Rangers side of things, I'll say, from the Ranger game, but the other 3 have all been turned into the next day. The sky is falling because it has such major implications.
Yep.
Or so it seems anyway, because that was what was that's what you take out of, to an extent, the Pittsburgh game, and then Pittsburgh gives it right back and tells you and makes it seem like, nope, you tried to give it to us and we're giving it back.
We're giving it right back to you.
And Jersey's done the same thing. Quite frankly, at this point, and I'm just gonna I'll pull up their schedule really quick because just to get a feel for it.
Well, speaking of schedules, I do have the Flyer schedule. You only have 2 more divisional games this month. It's Carolina and
the Rangers again,
both at the end of the month.
Well, because they are all in April. April, they play 5 of them. It's almost
entirely divisional.
They start April with the Islanders. I know that. So they start April with the Islanders.
Buffalo, Columbus, Montreal.
And they have another one with the Rangers in there.
And then you end with Rangers, Devils, Caps to end the season. Yeah, you play 8 games in April and 7 games, and 3 of them are against the division. Oh, 4. I'm sorry.
4. Yeah, no,
4 of
it's,
them
I
are.
was gonna say it should be. It's more than
Yep.
half.
Yeah.
Because the only non-divisionals they have in April are, like you said, there's the Buffalo game thrown in there. They play Montreal.
A little road trip: Buffalo, Columbus, Montreal.
No, well, Columbus is divisional
Oh, you're right. Oh, I forgot.
technically.
Man, I know that realignment happened in like 2010 or whatever year that happened. I still think it's a 4-team division.
I hear you.
The old Atlantic division.
So here's where I'm getting with this. So Washington has in front of them right now, and this is where this is going to get really interesting. Washington has in front of them for the coming week Arizona on Sunday afternoon, which, okay, listen, this is the interesting part though, because both teams are technically out of the playoff picture, right? So it's not like it evens things out to an extent. Like anything could happen here.
Right.
So,
yeah.
But this is their opportunity, right? Like if they beat Arizona, they've got Pittsburgh on the schedule for Thursday. If they beat Pittsburgh,
Somebody's got to win that game.
Right. And and so they got Chicago too.
Well, that's fair.
They should win Chicago, right?
Should, yeah.
But then look at their gauntlet coming up after the trade deadline. Winnipeg, Edmonton, Seattle, Vancouver, Calgary, all on the road.
Ooh, they're doing their swing right after the trade deadline.
Yes.
Oh, that's tough.
Only to come home and play, ready for this? 4-game homestand, Toronto, Carolina, Winnipeg, Detroit. Then go on the road for a quick roadie against Toronto, then back home for Boston, and that takes you into April.
Ooh.
By the way, nasty. In case anybody's crazy interested in the possibility of what this could mean, what all this could mean, the last game of the regular season for both the Flyers and the Capitals is each other.
Yep. And that could be a game. That could be the game.
Something very interesting about that game, though. So the Flyers' schedule is they wrap up that Tuesday night in April against the Capitals.
Yeah.
But they'll have played the previous game the Saturday before against the Devils.
2 days off going into that game.
And that's a 5 p.m. start on that Saturday, correct?
Yeah. Yeah.
Just because I know that's one of the games on there. The Capitals on the same Saturday will play Tampa at 5:30, which that's no picnic, right? They have
Boston. Depends on where Tampa's at.
Sure. They have Boston the Monday night before, and then have to play Philly.
And it's a back-to-back?
Yes.
Ooh. Okay. So listen. We gotta keep it in the current. We gotta keep it trade deadline. We
I know.
Start fantasizing about the week before the playoffs yet.
Because where I'm trying to go with it is that I believe it was brought up on, I think it was brought up on like either the pregame or intermission show, one of these, that you'd rather be in the Flyers position at this point than any of the other teams. When you're chasing it, you don't want to be the team that has to win the games. When it's especially,
you'd rather be the team with the 5 points.
And I think we've brought this up before too. Like the Flyers have played more games than any team in the division this year to this point.
Yep.
They're at 62, which, by the way, let's lump that part into this conversation because it feels hard to believe that we're sitting at 20 games left until this regular season runs over. 20 left. That's it.
Remember when we were sitting here 20 games in going, they'll fall off. They're not this good.
I know. So everybody's got something that they can like to make up on this team. Like the Islanders have 2, Washington's got 3, Devils have 2, Pittsburgh still got 4. Like that's what even keeps all of these teams in the conversation.
Right.
You know, the Islanders can make up 4 points without the Flyers getting to do anything, and the gap is 5. That creates conversation. Washington's 6 back and has 3 games in hand. It's an even split. They can still match them. The Devils are 7 back with 2 in hand. Okay, that would cut it to 3 if they win those. Even Pittsburgh, if they won all 4, would cut it to 1. You know, like that's what keeps the conversation moving right now. But to me, when you look at those games and you know that you have games in hand, they're still must wins for you to get back into the picture. So the pressure still rides on you. You've got to do your part now. The Flyers have already won certain games to set themselves apart in this thing. They're already in the spot. It's not like they're sitting there in, it's not like let's flip-flop the Islanders and the Flyers and say now they're the first team out.
Right.
And they've got 2 extra games where it's like, oh, you now need a team to lose just to stay close. Well, no, it's the other way around. They need to win their games to get to you.
Absolutely. And if the situation was reversed and the Flyers were in the Islanders spot, just to kind of maybe look toward the trade deadline a little bit here. It wouldn't be a question should they trade Sean Walker. It wouldn't be a question should they trade Nick Sealer. We'd be sitting here going, get what you can get anything, because we're out of it, right? If the Flyers are 5 points out,
well, that's what I said about
they're selling Sealer, they're selling Walker, trade everybody. We're not making the playoffs. Well, that's no problem.
To go back to the previous week's games too, that's what I was saying about the Cal Peterson thing.
Right.
If Cal Peterson gives up 7 goals to the Penguins and you lose a game to the Penguins at the end of February and you're where everybody thought you were going to be, nobody cares. You're going to keep Cal Peterson for the rest of the year anyway at that point.
But because you are where you are, he gets
so you put him on waivers and you give Felix Sandstrom a shot.
You put him on a bus back to Lehigh Valley.
And you give Felix Sandstrom a shot at least to see what happens. And good on Felix Sandstrom for having a really solid game in his first time out. Now I will say this before we go too deep into it. Yeah. Cal Peterson's first game wasn't half bad either as the backup.
No, fair.
Like that game against Seattle, he gave up 2 goals. One of them wasn't even going to be close to his fault because it was off of Sean Couturier's stick. So
he played really solid in that game. So,
but this is what, like, as soon as you got this,
this is unacceptable, right?
Right, and the only question was it worth another opportunity, and they didn't feel it was. So now you can see what Sandstrom can do,
and if he goes down and puts 4 solid performances together in Lehigh Valley, and Sandstrom has an opportunity and struggles a little bit, then maybe we look at it again. But I also kind of expect Sam Ersson to play a lot of hockey down the stretch here.
So. Whoever it is at this point, you can I'm pretty certain I can pinpoint exactly which games. Okay. And I know that there's only a handful of back-to-backs left, and that's probably most of them.
Yeah.
Like you're the next, at this point in time, here's what I think is going to happen. So you used Sandstrom against Ottawa. So Ersson's going to go against St. Louis because he just got the night off. So Ersson's going against St. Louis. Ersson's going against Florida. Ersson's going against Tampa.
Yep.
Pretty simple stuff.
Yep.
I wouldn't be shocked if they thought that maybe they could squeeze a start out of Sandstrom against San Jose. Because
Erstrom's going to play all of them after that, because you go Toronto, Boston, Toronto,
he's going to play the next 5.
Boston, Florida, the Rangers. That's a hell stretch, right?
Well, no, he's that the stretch of games is you're going to have to play Sandstrom against either Boston or Florida. Probably Florida.
I don't know. Saturday afternoon, 1:00 start against Boston. Sunday evening against Florida. You know what? If you had 2 days off after, I could say you do it. With only 1 day, I don't think you do. I think you're right. I think you get Sandstrom in there for one of those games.
So let's pull back for a second. So because here's the thing too. I think you're going to play him in one of those 2 games, depending on how everything is going.
Okay. That's true.
Here would be my, and I'm not even, to me, my goal would be, because playtime's over once they finish with the St. Louis game, because then you're up against the deadline and these 10 games start. And I'm lumping San Jose into the group of 10 because it's the one outlier.
Happens to be there.
Well, it's because it's the one outlier.
Yeah.
As much as it's a game that you pretty much must win in the middle of all of this because of the level of competition.
Because of everybody else you're playing.
Right. I'm still lumping it into the 10 because I'm literally at this point, if you're trying to talk playoffs and you're looking at what could be.
Oh, this is it.
It's not just this is it, but I'm looking at that 10 and I'm going, if you can find a way to split these.
Yeah.
I think that's ideal.
I don't disagree with that.
And I don't know where the split comes from. In terms of which games it would be. You've got
one of those 3-4-3 splits.
Well, the only one that I can tell you is that you better beat San Jose.
Yes.
After that, pick 4 of them.
I agree.
There's 9 other games. Pick 4.
Go find some points.
Well, that's too.
I'll
level with you there. Even if you're not winning them,
you got to find points.
I think you need to come away with minimum 8 points, ideally 10 out of the 10 game stretch.
Okay.
I'm gonna give you, I'll spot you 2 with the San Jose game that you should win.
They're gonna lose that San Jose game, and Twitter's gonna go ballistic.
If they do, it's
Right.
yeah, I hear
So
you. But
right.
bottom line
So
is, and then
yep,
so that's one of them. So like I said, maybe go the San Jose game for the backup. You're gonna have to split the Boston Florida one
the back to
somewhere
back.
in there.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would potentially give whoever the backup is a start against Chicago
Okay.
just
Okay.
to
Just to break it up a little.
especially if it goes the way that I think it's gonna go. Because if Harrison starts the 3 this week, doesn't start the San Jose game, then gets, let's say, 5 in a row to get to the Florida game. That's part of the back-to-back.
Yeah.
So Sandstrom's got to go against Florida just because that's how it maps out. Then you give Harrison 2 more games on the road against the Rangers and Montreal. You could possibly spot, Sandstrom a start there against Chicago to have Harrison only play 2 during that little stretch to come
Right.
back, play the Islanders, get 3 days. I would probably give Harrison Buffalo, give Sandstrom or backup
Columbus.
insert backup here, Columbus. And
And
then
so much of that depends on how many points you need too.
and then honestly from there, probably ride it out with Harrison.
Almost definitely, because at that point you start warming them up. So
Well, not even that, but at that point it's 4 games over the course of like 10 days.
right, exactly. So.
And he'll have just had a stretch where it's like, okay, listen, you just, if you're giving Sandstrom 6 out of the 7 games in April, it's 6 starts in 16 days though.
Yeah. It's no joke.
Like
it's a good workload.
Well, no, it's a good workload, but it's not going to be compared to March. Like it's actually good relief to kind of refresh.
Right, that's what I'm saying.
As opposed to what he's going to play, which is 3 this week, probably 5 over a 9-day span the next week, and then again you're trying to fill it in. But that's why I think that at that point you're looking at, like I said, that would be what? San Jose, Florida, Chicago, and Columbus. Let's just say so that's 4 more. Yep. And they said before the Ottawa game, 4 or 5. Sounds about right. Like I think it's exactly where it is, and you don't have to there's a way that they could place Harrison against Chicago and just leave it at that. Like, so, and maybe look, maybe your answer is how well the 10 games go.
Right. Well, and maybe your answer comes from your general manager. As we get into the trade deadline here, do you think there's a chance that the Flyers make a move for a goalie? Now, I don't think it's going to be a huge move. They're not going out and getting, a starter. But do they go out there and do they pick up a backup, right? Because obviously we know Carter Hart won't be returning. His money is safe to be cleared. There's Jake Allen out there. There's a couple different names that have kind of floated around. Like, do you think anything makes sense for the Flyers?
Do I think it makes sense? No.
Okay.
Is there a chance? I'm not going to say there's no chance.
Okay.
Because Briere kind of left the door open for they're not taking anything off the table, and that included adding. And I don't think they mean by adding they're going to go out and be players for anything, because that would require first and second, and they're not doing that. But if
this is a reward the guys for having a great season by picking up a backup goalie to make it.
This is what I said this earlier on 97.3 this week too, when I was asked about it. If you can get somebody for a 6th or a 5th, maybe, I could see them potentially doing that, but
it's hardly worth it at that point.
Well, and it depends on how much of a lateral move it is. If you're getting somebody at this point, here's what I'll say about this kind of, because I think my opinion's changed a little bit on this since being asked about it earlier last week, because really the question came up after Peterson's game against Pittsburgh.
Of course. Right.
And at that given moment, because I didn't think they were going to go the well like this early. I didn't think it was coming hey, within a day or a couple days, it's Peterson's on waivers, so Sandstrom's coming up.
Sandstrom's back up, right?
And that means that Sandstrom's going to be given his shot now. Because if they hadn't gone there yet, and you're still waiting for the deadline, then I'm sitting here kind of going not that I don't understand it, but it's if you're going to ride it out partially with Peterson, what's the lateral move? Or not the lateral move, but it's is everything just a lateral move, or are you actually making improvement? Right. And in Sandstrom's case, I wonder if getting a call up now, despite what the numbers looked like in the minors, which weren't very good.
Sure.
Is this a fresh start for him, where it's I want to step into this now. I was here last year.
Right.
and
He
it
was
didn't go
solid
very.
he was
No, it
solid
didn't,
at points last year.
but it didn't go very well in terms of results.
No, of course.
Like the guy played in 20 games last year and got 3 wins.
Yep.
One of them being the very last start and game of the season. Like it was the team's last game of the season. He got the start and they won the game in overtime.
Right.
You know, so for me, I wonder if it's a fresh start for him and that he looks at it as an opportunity to still be around here despite everything. Like you show up for, the numbers in the minors, what they are, you show up at the NHL level and play your first game and your numbers are blank.
Absolutely.
For the year.
And he looked good on Saturday against the Ottawa Senators.
And Ottawa, look, I'm not trying to downplay it because Ottawa's not a great team. We get it, but it's the same thing.
They're better than an AHL team he was just playing against.
Fair enough. And I look at what Cal Peterson did against Seattle, and I had thought after that game, he didn't face a lot of shots, but he had kept him in a game, made enough good saves to be worthy of another start. And then when the other start happened, it was not just that it was bad, it was so bad. He has a bad start against Pittsburgh and gives up 4 goals. And I think it's just a bad start, and there's other reasons why you don't win the game.
Of course, or even if the team does manage to score 6, maybe you win that game, but he doesn't necessarily look the best.
Right, but at that point, then he probably still gets another shot because at least you like that's the weird thing. Like I'm sitting here saying because at least he kept you in, he kept you in the game, right? Like technically you were in this game too. Right. At 7-6, it's just you score 6 goals, you better win the game.
And even the way that whole game felt, it felt like they were chasing it. But
right, but like my point though is that Sandstrom come now off of that first game is going to have a 2 is his goals against average, and he has finished with a .923 save percentage. Yeah. That'll get it done as a backup. You're not looking for like it's not like they're trying to find a new starter.
No, you're just looking for a guy.
You're looking for a capable backup for 5 games.
Play a couple games down the stretch here and jump in if, God forbid, Sam Ersson gets hurt in the playoffs. Like that's
a different story to me. And
of course, right. But that's all you're looking for out of him at the most.
And for what it's worth, whether this was Peterson, whether this is and turns out to be for the rest of the season, Sandstrom, we'll see where it goes, obviously.
Right.
It doesn't matter to me. They're not either way. I don't think either of those 2 guys is the backup next year.
That's probably fair.
And I'm not trying to pave the way for Alexei Kolosov either in that sense. Okay. Like Kolosov's probably your primary starter in the minors. I'm saying they go out and they get somebody else next year. For sure.
Okay.
The backup,
I think that makes a lot of sense when you lose a guy who was in your organization for several years and plan to be your starter.
And go look at if you go look at the list of goalies that are going to be free agents, there's plenty of backup quality guys there. So if you want to figure out like if you're going to go into next year and the goal is, okay, as much as Sam Ersson already is going to have had like roughly half a season to show that he's starter capable, number 1 capable to an extent, it's still not going to be a big enough sample to wrap your whole future around him.
Should Sam Ersson be in the Calder conversation?
That's a bit of a layered question right now. Because the reason I'm saying is that yes, I think he should be to some extent. I still think Bedard is up there, and I think Brock Faber's the next guy who I would put in line. But if you're struggling to find a third, I think Ersson's a reasonable player to consider.
He should get some hefty ballot love.
The reason I'm saying it's a layered question is, can I mention somebody else who's a rookie?
Is there another Flyer who you'd maybe vote above him in the Calder
There's another Flyer who's doing a lot of things lately that should be turning heads right now, so I'm going to bring him up. So let's get to him.
Let's talk about maybe my favorite Flyer over the last 10 games or so since he's come back from injury.
So since the Ranger game.
Yeah. Tyson Forrester, man. Tyson Forrester, man. Like, this is a guy that we've talked about here on this show since he was drafted, right? Like, we've been maybe not super duper on the Tyson Forrester train just because things were so difficult, drafted kind of during one of the weird COVID drafts and blah, blah, blah. But
he was the ultimate weird draft guy,
right?
Because that was the draft that was in October,
right?
And then he didn't have a team to basically go back and play on because they still weren't playing junior hockey at the time. So he started as a phantom.
Yep.
I still think that to an extent paid huge dividends for
Oh,
him
entirely. He got a year to learn how to be a professional at the professional level in
at
a
18
bit of
years
a
old.
right, in a bit of a weird year where you kind of get a little bit of that bonded by fire type of situation.
Sure.
But he comes in that season, has 17 points in 24 games. Nothing to scoff at as again a first year professional playing leagues above where he should be playing at this point in time. Right. If everything's normal, he's still in juniors. He's still in the O. He ends up going back to the O next year, puts up 11 points in 13 games, splits some time with the Phantom. Things were really funky during COVID. Okay.
Sure.
Real funky. But like, and he did make his NHL debut the next year, scored a couple of points. But this is last year. But this is the first time he's really stuck. The first time he's really a roster member at this point in time, and he has 16 goals and like what 5 or 6 of them since he's come back from injury.
6 since coming back. Yeah.
In 6 games.
I'm trying to do the math in my head. I'll check it in a second. I'm looking at the I wanted to look at his other numbers first because you were just bringing up all the other stuff and the back and forth and all that.
Right.
He,
5 games since the Rangers game.
So that little sampling from last season, 3 goals, 7 points in 8 games. Everybody got really excited about that.
Yeah.
And he started this year off, kind of trying to find the scoring touch. It took a while. He wasn't even fully in the lineup at the beginning of the year. He didn't score a goal until November 18th. That's his first goal of the season. And otherwise, by that point, he had 3 assists otherwise.
Right.
So, and this is going to be part of he had one other run kind of like this because he scored twice against the Devils at the end of November, both on deflections. You'll definitely remember the second one because it was a game tying goal that got it to overtime in the final minute of the third period.
Okay.
He scored again the following game against Pittsburgh. He scored again when they played Pittsburgh again the following Monday. That was the game that went to overtime that Couturier won the game on the odd man rush. And then, so there was that was that little burst. So he had 1 goal prior to that. So that was, now it's 3, 4, 5, all of a sudden, a little bit of a hot streak. He then didn't score another goal until January 12th.
Okay.
So you're talking from December 4th to January 12th, he didn't score a goal. That's when he finally got number 6, January 12th.
He got hurt shortly thereafter, right?
Well, he scored a goal against Colorado in a home game. Had two kind of meaningless ones against Boston before they went into the All-Star break.
Okay.
So since coming out of the All-Star break, he scored against Winnipeg, by the way.
Oh, okay.
2 games back. He wasn't able to play. The injury happened right after they played Seattle.
Okay.
So he was out for a little stretch of time there, and then since coming back, he's scored obviously the only goal that they got against the Rangers. Scored 2 against Pittsburgh the next day. Scored against Tampa. Scored 2 against Ottawa. And if you lump in the fact that you go back to roughly right around the All-Star break, that he had scored against Winnipeg and had 2 against Boston as well, he doesn't just have the 6 over the 5 games since coming back from injury. You add 3 more, so he's got 9 over the course of 9 games.
Is that good?
It's good when you only have 16 on the year.
Right. So it seems like Tyson Foerster's warming up at the right time. It's
if
exciting.
You look at him scoring goals, he scored that couple against Boston, scores against Winnipeg, right? And as he goes to get hurt, right before he gets hurt.
Yeah.
You're looking at the fact that he was sitting on 10 at that point. Because obviously now he's up to 16. He's got 6 over the last 5.
Yeah.
So he was sitting on 10 at that point. If you would have, to say that 20 was a possibility felt like a joke.
Oh, yeah.
In February. Come on. It's not happening that way.
Not for a young kid, first real season in the NHL. No, come on. We've seen the best hockey out of Tyson Foerster. He's got 10 goals, blah, blah, blah.
But they've got 20 games left and he needs 4.
Yep. And the way he played this week, and because by the way, they haven't been lucky shot, funky bounce here, this, that, the other. These are goal scorers' goals.
Sure.
And he is going to goal scoring areas, making great plays, putting the puck in the freaking net. And that is very exciting to see. And he's starting to play with confidence, and he's starting to play with a little bit of swagger. And he's going to mesh in really nicely with the forward core based on what I've seen out of him so far. And like, obviously he has been, but
Right.
if you can add him over the course of the next couple of years, you add him up to your top 6 with your Konechny's and with your, eventually Michkovs, things are going to get real fun. Like,
well,
I'm starting to see Tyson Forrester as a piece of that future.
I hear you there. I mean, the thing that he's got to do, and I think the Ottawa game was a great example of this, because the Ottawa game he had 7 shots on goal, which is by far
He's starting to fire the puck.
Well, it's not that he's starting to. That's what he needs to do, if especially if the confidence starts going up. Because let me tell you something in common about all the other games beforehand, and he was already scoring on occasion in these games, but just something in common for it. Like when they played he didn't score against Washington. Obviously, he didn't have a shot on goal in the game. The game before that was the Tampa game. He did score a goal, only 2 shots on goal though. The game before that was the Pittsburgh game. He had 2 goals, 3 shots on goal, though. The Ranger game, he had 4. All right, that's better. But then before that, it was 2, 2, 2, pretty consistently. He doesn't have many games where you sit there and you go, hey, this is a guy who's trying to take, 4, 5, 6 shots a game. There's occasional ones, but if that can be the norm, if he becomes a guy who wants to shoot to the level that Owen Tippett has found.
I was going to say Tyson Forrester's new roommate on the road is Owen Tippett. His new partner on the bus is Owen Tippett.
Still got work to do. Don't get me wrong.
Of course.
Tippett still misses the net a lot, but
the volume is there.
Right. If that's a guy who you can get a lot of, from a shooting perspective, if that's a guy you can get a lot of shots out of from every game and can kind of keep building towards something, and let's be real about something with Tippett, by the way, that he's coming, still relatively coming back from an injury. I'm not saying that it's recent. He came back after the All-Star break.
Right.
You're almost a month removed from that, but he's probably still trying to get a feel for it back as well. He hasn't scored a ton since coming back from that.
Right.
He, in fact, I'm going to try to just see if I can find that number, because he was ready to play as soon as the All-Star break was over. He scored 1 goal against Arizona, had 2 in the outdoor game against Jersey, where it looked like, oh, he's finding it again.
Right.
And then went 4 more games without a goal, scored against Washington. So he's only got 4 goals since coming back from injury, and he had 18 going into that. We were sitting here talking, for him, same thing. You're down to 20 games left, and as easily as he can go on a hot streak and put up 5, 6, 7 goals in a short period of time, sure, he might stay kind of inconsistent for the rest of the year, and you're looking he might barely break 25 because of that.
Right.
At one point in time, it looked like there was no doubt he's going to shatter what he had last year because he's on that pace. Then the injury happened. Then he's come back and he hasn't scored as much. 30's not a given anymore with him.
No, I agree.
It just isn't, and it was, and it felt like it was at one point in time. But what is
putting pucks on that,
right? But what is consistent is he'd
10 shots against the Rangers, 6 shots against the Capitals on Friday. He's still putting up big shot games.
Well, because he had 10. Obviously, the night that we talked the most about, or the game we talked about most with Owen Tippett, was the Dallas game where he had the highlight reel goal. That was the first time he put up 10 shots on goal this season.
Right.
Right. I mean, he immediately follows it up, by the way, with or I'm sorry, no. He had taken 10 against St. Louis. He only took 5 that night against Dallas. I'm sorry.
Okay.
But so that was the follow up to 10. Of course, the next game he had none. Interestingly enough, but then it slowed down a little, 3, here's another 5, a couple 4s, and then all of a sudden, oh wait, what's this? He took 10 in the outdoor game alone. Next game against Chicago, 5 more. Next game against the Rangers, 10 more. And then it's funny because what ends up happening against Pittsburgh, he only had 1. Not a factor. Against Tampa. He didn't have, he didn't do the scoring in the Tampa game. They scored 5 goals in the third period, and he's not a factor in any of them. Not a goal, not an assist, any of that. Only had 2 shots.
Right.
Just that line wasn't the line it was going. Against Washington, he has a goal and an assist, took 6 shots on goal.
I did just want to mention, by the way, Owen Tippett, 10th in the league in shots. Sorry, that's what I was looking for here. 10th in the league in shots. So he fires the puck, man.
It's the opposite of Nick Seeler.
Yes, it is the opposite of Nick Seeler.
Nick Seeler blocks all the shots.
Man, that guy's a maniac.
He is a maniac.
Absolute maniac.
I don't want to stay on it for too long. I want to finish with Forrester for a second.
Yeah.
With here's the important thing about what Forrester did too, by the way, is okay, look, there's no rhyme or reason to like him in the spot with the first goal that he scores, because it's just good play off a face off, get into a situation where you have a shot
and take
it. Yeah. That's just playing the game or whatever. The play he makes to get the breakaway in the final seconds, though, that's the one that tells you he can be a game changer.
Yes. That's when I talked about him being in the future top 6 of this team with your high skilled players. That's the kind of play I'm talking about, because you have to have the ability to play 200 feet in today's NHL. And that's the sort of play that makes you so incredibly dangerous.
You just see these, you're looking for guys at this point. When you look at guys on this team right now and you're looking toward the future a little bit while you're doing it, you're looking for guys that you feel like can be all around players. Yeah. You need high end talent eventually. And you've got Mishkov in the pipeline, and Mishkov's going to come over and be that eventually.
And hopefully he makes everyone around him better as well.
Well, that's the one thing to me that I keep hanging on to, is that because there's a lot of people that are going to look and sit there and say that the development hasn't been great and things like that. I'm not saying some guys' development hasn't been great. I'll agree to that.
Yep.
Well, because if you're looking at certain guys and thinking especially if you're either thinking where's the step forward or why isn't this guy sticking right now,
you can't tell me Morgan Frost's development has been handled well. You just can't.
Well,
overall,
I'll tell you what the problem with that is, though. Frost needs a finisher with him,
right?
In some capacity, they don't always put him in that spot. The back and forth, and the back and forth at the beginning of the season became ridiculous.
I agree. That's mostly what I was referring to.
You know what I mean? It seems like that's mostly behind them now.
Yeah.
So maybe there's a turning point there, but for now, you can't change the first half of the year with what was going on. That's all I'll say about that. I'm talking more about all right, so maybe Noah Cates is not as much of an offensive guy as he was last year. So maybe that's more of the average for what he's going to be. Or you sit there and you look and after a certain point you go, here's a perfect example too. You're trying to develop guys, and the Washington game is starting to get out of hand, and Bobby Brink and Ula Lixel are getting it from Torts.
Yes.
Just absolutely getting ripped into for taking a long shift, not getting off the ice, benched for the rest of the game.
Yeah. Messages are being sent. Right.
Brink to me still has a shot to be an NHL play. He's got NHL capability. It's not going to be superstar capability. It may not even be top 6, but it's going to be capability. I don't know about Lixel.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Like that's a guy who after a certain point I sit there and I go, listen, if you're not changing things around for that, like you need to have a calling card somewhere.
Right.
Brinks may never be defensive play. So you may need to kind of be he may be a specialty kind of unit. He may be a guy who plays fewer minutes. It's just maybe the way it goes.
Right.
Forrester's developed into a player that I see both ends of the ice and I go, you've got maybe top 6 chops because you're playing very well defensively. If you can get hot with the scoring and if you can find your scoring touch and do things like you did in the game against Ottawa on a more consistent basis, you're going to be relied on a lot. The same way that last year they did that with Tippett. The same way you've seen Konechny emerge into that guy. And the same way you still hope that Joel Farabee stays in that kind of category. And the good news is that inevitably, if guys huddle around, even I get it. Not every one of those guys is an ideal top line guy. They're not gonna be, but
sure. Well,
But if you have enough guys that I think fall into their possibly a second liner, but maybe, like you can eventually bridge the gap and go, okay, listen, second, third line, it doesn't matter. They're
right.
middle sixers.
Well, and the other thing I wanted to mention is Lixell is 24. He's probably pretty close to what he is, but Brink is still only 22. Like there is a chance that he still kind of has a next year. If he has a really solid offseason, maybe packs on a little bit of muscle.
Sure.
I could see Bobby Brink still kind of taking a next step, but I understand where you're coming from, where at this point,
well, and the thing that frustrates
the ceiling is coming down a little bit.
Well, and the thing that frustrates people is that Brink gets the message sent to him and not Cam Atkinson. And Atkinson got scratched this week, so I'm not saying there wasn't a message there, but you know what I mean. Like, it's more the within game, and like I get it. It's just, you know what I mean. Like people look at certain guys and go, "This guy gets to keep playing. Why doesn't he?" Or whatever.
Well, and I think John Tortorella is still trying to prepare a young team for the playoffs.
He is, but there's also like what you also can't deny is that, like, listen, at some point in time when like, first of all, I get tired of hearing about stuff with Tortorella because it's like, listen, this is year 2 of this. All right. If you're not used to what he does, especially because this is always his track record, then you're not paying
attention. Right. John Tortorella is nothing if not consistent. Like he tells you exactly what he expects. Right. What John Tortorella expects at any given moment.
Well, and that's why. So this is why, again, this is like I want to stay on the trade deadline thing because this is where, like, after the St. Louis game, this is why I said playtime's over to an extent because everybody's been able to get to this point. 62 games into the season, it'll be 63 after Monday. There's 19 more to go at that point. And for 63 games out of the 82, you've been able to kind of avoid this situation for the time being because you've been able to pull a lot of the right, push a lot of the right buttons, do a lot of these things that have worked to this point. But now you're at the point where, with the trade deadline coming and knowing that this is the only opportunity you have, like, I just want to go through to an extent because at this point in time, there's only really a small handful of names that are really going to potentially even be on the move. They're not going to move anybody else.
Right.
Like, so the first name I want to bring up is Scott Laughton, and I'm going to tell you why I'm bringing up Scott Laughton first. It's not because he's more likely to move or not. It's because I think his solution is the easiest to explain.
Okay.
Because Laughton's in a spot where with 2 years left on the contract after this year, you don't have to do anything.
Not at all. Nope.
And just because, like, the reason I'm saying you don't have to do anything is not just because I'm saying you're going, oh, Scott Laughton's great, great in the room and he's valuable to leadership and he's valuable to a playoff run and a playoff team would love to have him. And if this team's a playoff team, then you may want to keep a guy like that. I'm not saying it for that reason. What I'm saying is that just because the trade deadline comes and goes on Friday does not mean that Scott Laughton getting traded is dead and gone.
Of course.
There's 2 years left on the contract. Yep. It is still something that can be revisited.
It will come up this offseason.
But, well, I'm not even worried about whether it does or doesn't.
It's a speculation point, right?
And I'm not even worried about if it does or doesn't. My point is that it's not necessarily going to change the long-term plan. He's already under contract. It's not like they sat there and said, like last time, here's the choices: extend him or trade him. What do we do? We're going to extend him instead of getting something for him at that time.
Can you get any assets for JVR? Chuck Fletcher says no.
Trades are hard.
The trades are hard.
But that's where it comes to the defenseman, because this is where all your expiring contracts are, which means that there's an element of it's now or never. There is no turning back from the trade deadline.
Right. So that deadline, it creates a deadline.
Right. Now, this is where things get interesting. Like, I keep going back and forth on this in terms of not what's going to happen, but like trying to figure it all out because there's always a lot of stuff going on. And to be honest, by the way, the Laughton stuff has cooled off a lot lately. Like, I feel like I'm hearing less and less about Laughton and more about Walker Sealer.
I agree.
Like, at this point in time, let's just clear the table right here with this for a second. It's Sean Walker, Nick Steeler, Mark Stahl. Those are the three guys we're talking about when it comes to the defensive side.
Right.
I'm going to start and say this. Like, I've always included Mark Stahl in these things because he's on an expiring contract. And regardless of what you think of Mark Stahl, NHL
around the league
NHL GMs love these types of guys.
Yep.
hey, playoff team veteran kind of guy, right?
Right.
Like I'll take that guy all the time.
Do you need a guy to sit out your Pride night?
Well, I wasn't
Sorry.
going there. I know.
Anyway.
No, I'm saying no. Like, but even if he's a seventh, teams
Yep.
always sit there and go,
Well, sure, and
I don't
definitely
mind
to the
having a guy like
playoffs.
that I can pull
Yep.
in for a playoff game,
Yep.
regardless of what the situation is. I'm just not getting the sense that there's a whole lot of activity with him. So
No,
I think he's just here.
Well, because why? He hasn't really played all that much. When he has, he's looked like a 40-year-old man.
I'm gonna pull back on that a little bit. Like there was a course of time prior to like the Pittsburgh game that I'm like, he's been fine. I'm not like trying to sit here and say he's the best thing ever. Like
yeah,
I'm being realistic about it, but I'm also
horrendous.
sitting there going like at the end of the day, I was less concerned about the pairing he was on and more concerned about, kind of the Sanheim Drysdale combination or the,
Right.
York Sanheim combination. It was like that was what was getting beat up more by the top talent.
Right.
And as long as they could protect Stahl in the sense that, oh, you're not out there against, like he ended up out there a couple of times against, like, I'm trying to remember which game it was that I saw. Okay, maybe it was the Tampa game, because there were a couple times he ended up out there against like the Kucherov line. And it's like, this is a mismatch, and you can see it. Like,
this is a bad idea.
You're hanging on by a thread until he can get off the ice, that kind of thing. But the Pittsburgh game was really the one where he was bad. Like that, he was bad in the Pittsburgh game.
Yeah.
And then since then, to be honest, like I look at the last couple and it was like, they all kind of got everybody had a rough final two periods against Washington.
Right.
And then I didn't see a whole lot against Ottawa that was bad.
Well, since the defensive core kind of seems to be the core of the trade conversation here, do you if Jamie Drysdale is perfectly healthy, are Sealer and Walker both gone?
I still don't know.
Okay. As it sits right now with Drysdale, we got an update on Drysdale this week, right? Or at least some rumors.
He's week to week. They said they're going to reevaluate him in 2 weeks. Here's the concerning part. So when Danny Briere addressed the media on Friday during the Washington game, with Konechny, it was, we're getting through the weekend. We're going to evaluate, but it looks like he'll be able to be back like within the following week.
Much more of a day-to-day update. Right.
Well, a day-to-day update, but something that feels like, oh, it's probably soon. I don't know about like Monday. He's not playing this weekend. I don't know about Monday. Thursday seems like a good possibility.
Right.
All right, fair enough. With both Drysdale and Ristolainen, it was they're going to go through a reevaluation period following this week-to-week diagnosis, and then that's going to determine whether they are able to possibly play at all.
Right.
Well, that doesn't sound encouraging. And listen, when Drysdale got hurt, you're lucky that it wasn't just immediately season ending right then and there. Like, the fact that there's even a remote possibility is better than
it looked
what
awful
it looked
when it first happened. Yeah.
Right. The catch here is that if Ristolainen and Drysdale are not able to come back,
can you move both Sealer and Walker, or
I don't
honestly
think,
even either of them?
Well, I'm answering this one for you right now, or part of it.
Okay.
I don't think they're moving Sealer.
Okay.
Straight up. I don't think they're moving Sealer. And to be honest, I can even level with keeping him like with an extension for a short, like for 2 to 3 years.
I don't hate that, as long as the number is supremely reasonable.
Well, sure, of course the number needs to be reasonable, but you know what I mean. Like I'm talking more with the term as well. The reason being is because with Sealer, I feel like there's a little bit more consistency involved. Like he's had to step in and play more games than I think like most people would have thought they would see him play.
Okay.
It just feels like, especially the last couple of years, he's gotten better somehow. Like he went from being the guy that you wanted to get rid of 3 years ago to like
he's fine.
He's capable.
Yeah, he's fine.
And well, okay, here's the reason why I'm saying I'm okay with it. I'm looking at his type of play anyway. I don't know who they've got who fits his type of play. They got 3 other. Right. Well, I'm saying, like, if you traded Sean Walker tomorrow and said, Ronnie Attard, come on down like you've been called up this week, you're going to be the guy who jumps in and fills that spot. At least they're relatively similar.
Yeah.
So I can sit there and be like, okay, that's at least a guy that I understand why you're trying to swap there. I don't know who they have like Nick Sealer, who's just going to eat it all game and play at the back end, and that's the end of that.
That's fair.
That's
valid.
So I don't think they like that's the only reason I can justify it, because at this point in time, and here's the other reason too. Sealer, like I said, because Sealer's got more of a track record to me.
Mm-hmm.
You got Sean Walker last offseason as a throw-in piece, not knowing what he was going to be. We sat there when the trade happened saying, hopefully it's decent.
Hopefully he's decent. Yeah.
Right. Hopefully it's decent so that this way you can turn it into something. And
turns out he's been probably your most consistent defenseman.
He has, but here's the problem. I believe I said to you several weeks back, we did a comparison. I told you who I thought he was like. It was a while ago, but I think I told you who I thought he was like, or who he reminded me of.
I don't remember.
Matt Niskanen.
Yes.
You know what I remember about Matt Niskanen? And that one real, he's steady, but what
his nickname was Steady Eddie?
Oh no, I'm saying what I remember about Matt Niskanen, that one really strong year that he had, it was 1 year.
Yep.
He never gave you the chance, because he retired after that year. He never gave you the chance to see whether or not that was going to hold or not.
Or whether it was a flash in the pan. Right.
And with Sean Walker, you're getting everything and more that you could have possibly wanted from this guy. And that can make you really quickly get infatuated with the idea that this guy seems like a great idea to keep. Look at how good he's playing. Look at how consistent he's been. He's been on our, between him and Sealer, they've been the most consistent pair the whole season. There's no guarantees that doesn't happen next year.
I smell a butt coming here.
Well, and my point is that if it crashes hard, that's going to be a bad look for the front office if you decided to extend him. With Sealer, I feel like you know what you're getting. There's more than just this year to go off of. But with Walker, you've got nothing more than this year. He's revitalized his career, and it's probably best if you at least move him. Okay. You want to keep Sealer, because I think here's the other thing too. I think Sealer on his own still isn't getting you more than maybe like a third.
Is there any validation to, because you are a little thin due to injury on the defensive core right now, is there any is there any validity to maybe keeping Walker with no intents of re-signing him, but as he's your rental, quote unquote? Or do you think they need to move him for assets?
I would move him.
Okay.
Like, let's put it this way. He scored a goal.
You get where I'm coming from, right?
He scored a goal in the Tampa game, and I remember distinctly thinking after he scored it, they're going to miss him.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But thinking in my head, this is, it's going to, you're going to miss him, but this is what you got to do. Okay. To me.
And a month ago, a lot of people were saying the same thing about Scott Lawton.
Yeah, but
when there's all this talk about getting a first round pick,
but the problem with Lawton is, and it's not Lawton's problem.
Of course.
Because let's put it this way, Lawton's played better over the last stretch. It hasn't hurt one bit. The way, pretty much since his name popped up, he's been playing a lot better from an offensive side of things.
Right.
So that doesn't hurt things.
Tell me again how players don't read headlines.
Oh, they all know.
I know.
Yeah, Sealer said it on the postgame show.
Yeah.
Like that they
all know who's involved in the conversation.
But here's the thing. Because they don't have pressure with Lawton to do to have to do it now.
Right.
They can stand to, you want him, this is what it's going to cost, and I'm not changing my mind.
It's going to cost you a boatload.
And right now, maybe there's no team out there that feels like they want to go there. So then the Flyers are going to sit there and say, fine, we're keeping him.
Oh no, we have to keep him.
Right. And the thing is that I don't feel like that does anything to the fan base, because the contract's already there. He's signed for 2 more years at $3 million.
There's no contract anxiety.
No, the difference is going to be because I think they could keep, here's what I think could happen. I think they could keep Sealer beyond the deadline and not have to do anything regarding next year and beyond right away.
Okay.
I think they could table that almost and still be able to pick it back up, because Sealer's
you can sign him in May.
I think Sealer's been here long enough to
if he wants to stay, they know they know.
I'm not trying to say it might not be him to stay. I'm not trying to say it might not be a hard bargain, but it's because he's definitely due a raise. The guy's on it. Think about it. The guy's playing out of his mind, leading the NHL in block shots.
Yep.
And is on a $775,000 contract that's technically 2-way.
Right. Right. So 3
Like, do you
years,
think
two and
like
two and a
right?
half.
Do you think the guy right? Like, do you think the guy's worth at this point, like between 2.5 and 3,
Right.
just for 2 to 3 years, just to give him like a reward for being a good sport?
I don't disagree.
Especially if you don't have anybody else who's going to take that money coming up, like,
Right.
and especially also if your intention is A, Walker's gone, B, Stahl's gone at the end of the year,
Right.
C, whatever you decide to do with Ristolainen in the offseason, because Ristolainen's name was floating out there too.
Yeah. Of course.
So you've got a few different avenues where it's like you can keep Sealer and open up other places.
Yeah.
And it won't affect like, hey, I'm blocking people.
Right.
Now, you don't do anything with Ristolainen in the offseason. You think Walker's worth a contract extension. Then you're going to create a problem because of the fact that people are going to sit there and go, rebuilding, huh?
Right. We're
That's
kind of
the
log jamming full of veteran
I'm not
defensemen.
going to freak out on the Flyers for keeping Nick Sealer, potentially exploring re-signing him when the offseason could dictate that 3 of these other guys are not part of the picture, 2 or 3.
Right. Well, and at the same time, like if you make the playoffs this year and you don't take anything significant away from your roster and maybe you shore up a couple of spots, why would you expect to get worse next year?
Because this year has also been kind of a perfect storm.
That's fair. And that is a conversation for a future day. And those are all things that Danny Briere has to consider as we are 5 days out from the trade deadline.
And the point that I'm making also with it, like the point I'm making is that like if you kept Sealer and traded Walker, at least you went like not even went halfway. Like at least with Sealer, it's like Sealer is not the headliner of that group because he's not going to bring the offensive side. Like you're getting the defensive defenseman.
Sure.
So he's not going to be worth a first or a second or maybe even a third. And if you decide that's not really worth trading this guy out of the room, especially for the younger defensemen who may come in, like seriously, if Ronnie Atard's got to come in and play for Sean Walker in the next week, because that happens,
right?
I don't mind having Nick Sealer be there to mentor him.
That's fair
if that's the case, because you've already done part of the equation. You didn't get attached to Walker.
Right.
And in the offseason, you can look to not be further not be attached to people.
Sure.
But if you remain attached to all of them, that's the problem.
Right. And we will find out very quickly who Danny Briere is attached to. All right.
I just worry that if they do stay attached, it kills everything that they've built.
It can be tough. I agree with that.
Because you've built this whole year up on rebuilding, new era. We're going to do this the right way. And it's going to
feel throw it away at the drop of a hat.
Well, it's going to feel too much like the old days if you say, no, never mind. We're in a playoff race. We're keeping everybody.
We're going for it. No, that's fair.
Well, it's not even about going for it. Like I'm of the thought if you're a playoff team, you're going to be a playoff team with or without Sean Walker.
Right.
You know what I mean? And maybe
especially at this point.
Right. And maybe Sealer as well, potentially, if that's how it goes. I don't think it's going to go that way, but like
I'd be a little nervous with Ristolainen and Drysdale out to trade Sealer and Walker just with the current roster.
Well, and I'm like I said, I still think they just want to have Sealer around. And I
agree. I agree.
Well, and I like, to be honest, if Ristolainen was healthy, I think they'd be pushing that a little harder.
I don't disagree with that at all.
That's the other part of it. And that's why I'm saying, like, let's see what the offseason brings. But for now, like that's and obviously, like I do want to hit on this really quick too. That
of course,
there are games too, and
of course, we talked briefly about the fact that they play St. Louis Monday night, and that's a game you probably should win. You get a couple days off. The only other games that we have between now and our next show will be Thursday night against Florida and Saturday against Tampa Bay, both in Florida. So a little bit of a road trip here. So those players that are Thursday. Saturday in Tampa. So those players that are potentially looking at moving might be packing a little bit of a heftier bag when they go down to Florida because you don't know where you're going to end up, and you don't want to end up like Jamie Drysdale going shopping in the Mall of America to try to get your clothes. So a couple games in Florida this weekend. We will be back next week to talk about it. Was there anything you wanted to mention about this week's worth in terms of the games?
I think that
probably looking at 3 Harrison starts.
Yeah, well, I mean, we already said that part of it.
Probably, yeah.
I'm interested to see how this, like, they really need that St. Louis game to be another example of what they did against either Ottawa, Tampa kind of thing. Like over the last week, they really need another game like that just to kind of get it to the edge of the deadline. Like once you go on the road and play Florida and Tampa, you're starting that gauntlet. It's going to be a lot of anything can happen.
Yeah.
You know, and you're like at that point, you're going to need everything. You're going to need the goaltending. You're going to need the defense. You're going to need everything like that. I'm curious to see as things like I'm honestly curious to see what the timeline becomes for all of this activity. Like,
Yeah. I'm curious how much they get done before that Florida game on Thursday and how much is after that game on
look,
Thursday.
I'm not trying to like try to make it a puzzle for people in terms of what I
Sure.
think is going to happen. You want my honest opinion on what I think
Yeah.
like going to happen?
Yeah, go for it.
If they're going to move anybody at all, it'll be Walker and that's it.
Okay. And
That's
do you
what I
think
think.
you think that'll be Thursday before the game, or you think it'll be Friday?
I wonder if it will be. That's all
Okay.
I'm saying. Like, but if they're going to move anybody, I think it's going to be Walker because with Walker, you're in the same situation as Lawton, like we talked about, like
Right.
years ago.
It almost feels like JVR last year.
Not quite, because JVR, I think everybody knew that it wasn't going beyond last year, so it was either, and that's the other part of the equation is when you know it doesn't go beyond that year. There's an element where it makes it worse because it's like, well, why wouldn't you move the guy for whatever you can get?
Well, you don't think Walker's going to cash out and go sign a free agent? Like, if you don't trade him, you think he's going to resign here?
I don't think
he's going to resign wherever he's going unless there's a hefty extension involved.
Well, this is why I'm saying I think that I'm like 50-50 on where this goes, because it's either going to be, I'm calling it like the Lawton situation. It's either going to be on Thursday or Friday. You're going to find out he's traded or he's signing an extension.
Okay.
And if he's traded, then I think the Flyers did right by the situation, because I think that they've held firm to we're not overly attached to everybody. You know, you want to change your mind on Sealer because of what the injuries have done and the fact that he's a different type of defenseman than some of these mobile guys and all that stuff. Fine. You want to keep Lawton because it's not an urgent, like, got to do it right now thing. Like, the deadline does not mean you're going to now either have to keep him or lose him for nothing. Fine. You want to, but Walker's different. I feel like Walker is going to, I think is going to make a really, like, he's going to get a very decent raise.
Oh yeah,
on the next
absolutely. And
contract.
that's why I was.
And if the decent raise is $4 to $5 million,
you can't afford that.
No, I'll tell you what, there's only one way you can. And it's finding somebody who out there who decides maybe in the off season
to take Ristolainen
at complete full value though.
Yep.
And I don't know that that's possible.
Yep.
On top of the fact that in the meantime, you're already retaining on Kevin Hayes. You've got other buyouts in the system already that you're working around. I think Cam Atkinson's going to be a buyout candidate. I've leaned towards the possibility that Delorier could have been one as well. I lean a little less towards that now because
I think he's earning his keep a little bit more.
Well, he's playing with Sean Couturier right now.
That helps
too. I mean, beyond fighting a guy, like beyond fighting a 6'7" giant,
absolute monster. Yeah,
you're right. Like, what I mean.
Listen, if you fight Godzilla, you should earn a contract.
But
frankly,
but you get my point. Like, it's not that Delorier's earning it or anything like that. What I think is happening is that Delorier, you can bury on the fourth line or pull him out of the lineup on occasion, and it doesn't make a difference. Atkinson feels like, if you're going to keep going back and forth with he's in, he's not, because he's not playing up to par.
Yeah, it's just time to cut him loose and let him go play somewhere.
Delorier's also, like, let's be clear about something else too. First of all, Delorier's contract has 2 years left on it, so you'd be paying that out for 4 years if you bought it out for one. And the other part of the equation is it's a $1.75 million contract. If you got to eat it for another year to get a little closer,
it's not the end of the world.
You know what I mean? Right. Yeah. It's not as big of a deal as Atkinson at near $6 million, and he's just not giving you enough.
Delorier is the kind of guy that you could also trade at some point. Once you get under a year and a half left on that deal, you can trade, eat, get his number nice and low. Teams will love him for a playoff
potentially.
run, so.
I don't know if you go that far with it, but
regardless, that is a conversation for next year's trade deadline. As far as this year's trade deadline goes, it is just a couple of days away.
Mm-hmm.
We will be back next week to talk about all the results thereof. Is Sean Walker still a Flyer? Is Nick Sealer still a Flyer? All of the above. We will talk about all of that next week. In the meantime, make sure you follow Kevin on Twitter at Kevin_Durso and all the other social medias too. Find the show at YWT Podcast. Also find it everywhere you find your podcasts, including sportstalkphilly.com. All right, Kevin, one last Twitter refresh. No breaking trades to talk about here.
Yeah, I'm scrolling through. We made it through an entire show as far as I can tell with
All right.
without any.
So by my account, then the Denver Barkey contract will be announced in about 20 minutes.
No,
So,
I don't know. I don't know if it's going that far. I kind of like it. By the way, the only other thing that we got out of this whole thing is apparently Jonathan Quick is going to sign a 1-year contract extension with the Rangers.
that sucks because he's good there. So,
yeah,
all
but
right.
you know what that is? That's the same equation as the Walker thing to an extent. That was a guy that you didn't know you were getting that kind of quality this year, and now you're going to see if that equates to it next year.
Fair enough.
You know what I mean? You never know.
All right. We will be back next week to talk about all the trade deadline stuff, break down anything else that happens. I'm sure something big is going to go down around the league. So we'll be back next week to talk about that. Until then, see ya.